Welcome, everyone, to the Unfiltered Podcast. Lee Stephenson here, National Vice President of Church Planting with Converge.
I'm Danny Parmelee, and I oversee church planting for Converge Mid-America.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about some things that I think have probably been highlighted or heightened now because of pandemic kind of going on for so long. And it's related to the staff hiring side of conversation, Danny, where it's like, should I, can I, if so, who should I hire from a remote position? Meaning, you know, as a church planter looks at hiring different positions in the life of their church, is it okay to hire somebody that may live in a different city, never actually step on the campus of our church, whether or not, you know, we're in a portable situation or have a permanent situation? What say you to this conversation to kind of get us started, Danny?
Yeah, well, I'd love to share even just a little bit of my backstory and how I've kind of become passionate or excited about remote workers. And this is even, before the pandemic. But when I planted, first of all, starting out, we didn't own any office space. So I was working out of my house for that. Eventually, as the church grew and we started adding staff, we got to a place then, even when we owned a building, that we ran out of office space. And I remember that then some of the, on-site office staff, specifically in the communications graphic design department, said, well, we're not going to come in. We'll just work from a coffee shop type of thing. And it was during that time, I think that's when Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week came out, and it was like, hey, you can actually hire people from across the country to do things. I was like, wow, that's kind of a crazy idea. I mean, what's the difference for me if I need to hire, or if I'm doing all of my meetings with the director of communications while they're sitting at a coffee shop, in comparison to someone who's sitting, across the globe? And so that's when I started to dabble in, overseas freelancers. And I found it to just have some huge advantages. And especially for church planters now, I even teach and to train on this in the areas of, graphic design, web development, a lot of those types of things that you don't really need to hire someone full-time. And the advantage of hiring someone overseas is not only just the cost savings, but it's all contract based. So in other words, you can try people out. You can hire someone for a very short-term project. In other words, I'm going to hire a person to do my marketing postcard and I'm going to pay them $100, instead of saying, oh, I need to have some sort of graphic designer on my staff part-time for whatever, $20,000 or $25,000 a year, whatever the going rate is. So you're able to do that. The other big advantage that I found about doing it is that in the beginning, when you're a church planner, you're trying to cut corners to save money. You're having people from the launch team. You're having friends and family do graphic design and web development for you. They will always say, hey, give me feedback. Give me critique. I want to know what you want. And then you give that feedback and critique. And then there's hurt feelings, or there's this weird, like, wait, I designed this logo for you. You're not going to use it. And it's someone from the launch team. And then they get all ticked off and they leave.
They're banal shape. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if it's someone from the Philippines or Ukraine or something like that, it's like, hey, your logo sucks. I'm not using it. I mean, not that I would ever say that, but
we are unfiltered here.
We are unfiltered. And so, and to just, then you can move on. And the other thing is because the cost is so much less. And let me say this about cost. It is, you always have to be careful of taking advantage, because you can find people to work in other countries for $2 to $3 an hour, which I think could be anti-biblical. Like if you're taking, I mean, it's almost slave labor, and they will do it because they're so desperate. But when you're paying even a fair wage to someone in the Ukraine or the Philippines, it's just so much less than even if you're to hire a freelance graphic designer from a college student type of thing. So your money will just go much further. So oftentimes, even what I would do is, instead of saying, hiring a firm or a freelancer from the United States, saying, give me 4 concepts of this logo, I would hire 3 different graphic designers. I'd still be way less expensive, and I'm getting totally different concepts and styles of logos or postcards or website, landing pages, those types of things. And so it just really helped. And like I said, there's no skin in the game for them. If you use their stuff or not, they don't care. They got paid their money, and they're kind of on their merry way. So I know I'm talking a lot about kind of the overseas freelancers. There's lots of different platforms that you can use for that. I'm kind of partial to Upwork.com. I think they've done a great job, and it's very safe and secure. So in other words, you put money, you do a contract, you negotiate it with someone. It's very straightforward, and then that money gets put in escrow. And so let's say you hired someone $100 to build your entire website. Let's say they oversold their skills and the website comes back looking horrible, doesn't even work, whatever. You don't have to pay them. That money comes back to you. So it's not like people can run away with your money. So it's safe and secure, and you have the ability to do that. So there's other ones. I think there's elance.com. And I mean, you could probably just look up overseas freelancer. You find lots of different places, but Upwork is, has worked well for me. And I use it even in my personal life. I want to get something done on my house, and I want a 3D rendering of my basement. And instead of paying a interior designer, I'll pay someone to do an entire 3D rendering, video, and everything, and use it that way. So big fan of that. So that's one concept. Anything with freelance stuff that that you would want me to speak to, or that just didn't make sense as I shot off all that
No,
stuff?
I think that's helpful information, Danny. When it comes to freelance, I hear you talking about, like, when it comes to the areas of communication
Yep.
and marketing, you found great success
Yes.
with that.
Yep.
And I would agree. I think that you could probably definitely get a lot more out of your buck,
Yeah.
going that direction. Are there any dangers that you would vocalize when it comes to working with one of those specific groups in the marketing side?
Yeah. Well, obviously, and this is where it takes some time to learn it. But if you just off the bat, you're like, oh, Danny told me I should hire a freelancer to design my postcards and I can get it for cheap. There are going to be people that don't know you or your branding or your feel. And you're going to have there's certain, I would say, design styles from certain countries. So you'll get lots of people from Pakistan and India that will say, I am an expert graphic design artist. And they might be, and they might even work at some big firm, but it just is like, it comes and you look at it and you go, this is not our style type of thing. But that is something that you can learn over time, is that I have now my graphic designers that will design stuff, and I know their style. They know me, they know the feel, even for some of them that are believers, and they get conceptually the communication. So that's kind of the learning curve to it. And it can be a danger if you just think, oh, I'm just going to hire someone and they're automatically going to know kind of, thoughts. I'll say this because this was a lesson learned. I hired a freelancer to do our search engine optimization. So a lot of like back end tech stuff. And I found out later the search terms they were trying to think. And so it was like Catholic, mass, like just weird things. And they were sending out these Google advertisements where I'm like, all of a sudden I happened to like stumble upon, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is not the type of wording. This doesn't represent us at all. So it's a major fail there. And that I didn't even know about, because it's stuff that you don't see until later when you all of a sudden, happen to see one of your own ads and you're like, oh my goodness. So anyway, so that's the danger there. When they don't really know you or know your feel, you could be, wasting time or have some egg on your face like I did for that. So.
And I would even add to that, you've got language challenges depending on where you're working with. And then at the same time, being in the religious church space, that is so broad in and of itself. And especially a church planner is going to be probably on the more cutting edge side of that, that it may take a little bit of coaching in how you interact with your freelance workers. I know even for us, like right now with our church plant here in Orlando, one of the people that we've hired that works remote is our accountant. And so she handles all the major bookkeeping, checks payable, all that kind of stuff is done remotely. Now, if you choose to do that remotely, you definitely want to make sure that you have really strong checks and balances in place to make sure that you're not taken advantage of in that process.
Yeah. And I think accounting, that's a great example. That's another one where the person doesn't have to be there to know and to understand things. And there's also, even some of the little admin type of issues that could be potentially taken care of in, data entry and those types of things, which again, you either hire someone long term and you can pay them by the hour, or you just do it per project. Like, hey, we just, we did this large outreach and we had, 2,000 cards filled out. We're just going to send these scans over and someone will literally create the database, for us. And that's it. That's the end of the project. We pay them $50 to do it or something like that. So, I think it becomes a different thing. So even in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, he talks about his assistants, his actual, admins to be able to do it, where that's different in the church world. And specifically, I would say for a church planter or pastor, even in comparison to the role that I have now, is that person really needs to become almost your face. And so for them to have a tangible, they don't want, it can come across disingenuous if someone from some other country is emailing on your behalf and setting up calendar appointments. It just feels different than someone who actually goes to your church, knows you, and then even, project basis stuff. That someone that's like, hey, I was there on Sunday and I noticed that after the service you were doing X, Y, and Z, and I think that I could help out by doing, this, and that. Someone that's overseas is never going to be able to see that, experience that, know what they can actually take off of your plate. So I think that that's a little bit more difficult. Like I have a remote, executive admin right now. She lives in Milwaukee because it was my actual admin when I had planted the church in Milwaukee, and I just hired her on when I moved to Nashville, and to have her to continue to work. And that works for me, but that's because we're also spread out. But she still comes to events just to be able to interact with the church planners because, they've all gotten 100 emails from her, and it's like, oh, so you're Melissa. So
Exactly, exactly. And there is something, I agree, the close proximity of an assistant just to be able to be your voice and be, you use the word face,
mhm,
um, to those that you're constantly interacting with to make sure that they're representing you well,
mhm,
as you kind of doing whatever that thing is you do.
mhm.
What about Danny? That there's another layer of this, that I think it does affect the church planter because many church planters start in a portables type of situation.
Yep.
They don't necessarily have access to have office space,
Yeah.
but they may have staff people, even if it's extremely part time.
Mhm.
Uh, how do you manage that tension? Is it okay? Like, hey, just get your
Yeah.
work done. I don't care if you work from
Yeah.
home, Starbucks,
Yeah.
the other coffee shop down the street. Um, what have
Right.
you seen work, and what challenges
Yeah.
have you seen come out of that as well?
Yeah, and I was actually going to start off by saying this is so dependent on the personality and leadership style of the planter and also of the staff. So there's a danger in reading any of the books that are out there about remote work, and this is how you have to do it, and this is what works. So I would say, just as a general statement and disclaimer, is that you have to know yourself really well, your leadership style, and then also that our expect and we're seeing actually more articles about this right now because you're seeing lots of people who during pandemic got to work from home, got to work remote, and they're like, I love this fits great for me, it even works for my boss, we're not going back. And then you're seeing the flip side of that where it's like, I actually need to be in the office. Like, other people will excel just by being in community with other people, or even with their boss, and saying, I can't do this, I need to have face to face time, I need to be able to just bop in the office and ask a quick question and not schedule a Zoom call or text or email or that type of thing. So I think, kind of finding out for yourself who you are, that worked well for my personality. Part of it is because I did what was called management by objective. In other words, I managed you not by how many hours you put in, but I managed you by what you were able to complete and accomplish. And so, hey, if you were able to get that done and you did it at 2 a.m. to, 4 a.m. in the morning, and that's when you were at your highest capacity for getting good work done, that's great. I don't need you to do any office hours. And I myself, I hate office hours. So it worked really well for me. And like I said, for the first 5 years, we didn't even have rented office space. I worked out of my house, and every other volunteer staff and or paid staff worked out of their house and coffee shop kind of combination. And it worked well up to a point, for our kind of the ethos of our church, until we needed to become more formalized and had to say, okay, well, we have to gather together for staff meetings once a week. But even then, we still never had any office hours. So
How did you do staff meetings and stuff of that when you were say those first 5 years of
yeah.
everybody kind of being in remote locations?
I don't even remember. Maybe we didn't even have staff meetings. I don't even remember, because we didn't have any space. So I really think, and we were small, so it was slow growth for us those first years, and we didn't have money to pay. So everyone was essentially a volunteer working their job. So it was kind of like, hey, on Saturday, let's get together at the coffee shop. I
Or
don't
meet
know,
at my house type of thing.
meet at my house. And I don't remember even when we formalized and said, hey, we're going to actually have meetings now. So it might have honestly been 3 years in before I ever had a staff meeting. I don't know. Now you have me curious of my own
I'm
story.
sure.
I need to
I'm
go
sure.
back and ask Mike Morgan, who's now the executive pastor at Epicos, and say, hey, do you remember when we
When did we do
first
this?
started? Yeah, when did we do this? So
Well, I think too, it really depends on the culture that you're trying to develop, as to how you interact with staff working from remote positions. If culture is not going in the direction you want it to go, you're probably going to need to bring people closer together to spend more time and shoulder to shoulder type of activity, so that you can kind of drip the culture on them over
yeah,
time, so that they grasp that. If everybody's like totally bought in and understands and the culture is being preserved, then
right.
I think you can release and give a little bit more freedom to do a little bit more remote work
Yeah.
as needed.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I mean, I just think it's going to be interesting over even the next couple years, because now the expectation, or I guess it's just the mold has been broken as far as even office hours. That's almost the anomaly now. Like, oh, you must come into the office from this time to this time. So I think it'll be unique to see who or how the church even adapts to that, and, kind of goes along with culture. But then again, church culture is usually kind of behind. So maybe that won't be for like 5 or 10 years until someone's like, guess what? I can work remotely for my pastoral job.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see over time how that shifts and how it does
Mhm.
penetrate the church. And we'll stay tuned.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to the Unfiltered podcast. This has been a great conversation, just talking a little bit about some staffing, and thinking through it from a creative perspective. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep it real.